Canuslant 90 was held in Boston, Massachusetts from September 24th through September 27th, 1990. This four-day exercise was held at the United States Coast Guard Support Center in Boston's historic and picturesque North End. The term Canuslant represents the Canadian and United States Joint Marine Pollution Contingency Plan and Atlantic Operation Appendix. Exercise Canuslant is held every 2 years, alternating sites between the United States and Canada, to evaluate joint response to a major offshore oil spill with international implications. The players in Canuslant 90 were the United States Coast Guard, the Canadian Coast Guard, the Environmental Protection Agency, Environment Canada, and many other federal, state, and local government agencies from both countries. In all, approximately 275 people, representing more than 30 agencies and corporations, participated in Canuslant 90. The main objective was to evaluate existing plans, facilities, and equipment required in responding to a catastrophic offshore oil spill. Federal and state government representatives created the Canuslant 90 scenario based on actual past incidents, particularly the Argo Merchant and Exxon Valdez oil spills. The entire Canuslant 90 exercise was conducted in a real-life manner. Let's quickly review what happened at this important four-day exercise. Monday morning, September 24th, was quiet in the Boston Marine Safety Office. However, at 0600 hours, the phone rang and exercise Canuslant 90 began.
Okay, so I'll give them that number a call.
Once all the needed information was recorded, everyone was alerted to the emergency situation upon arrival at work, including the EPA's regional office in Lexington, Massachusetts.
And you're reporting that two ships collided?
Noting the situation's serious international implications, the on-scene coordinator, United States Coast Guard Captain William Boland, MSO Boston, assessed the scenario, conferred with the Canadian Coast Guard, and recommended to the United States Joint Response Team co-chairman that the joint plan be invoked. The Joint Response Team, the Joint Environmental Emergency Response Team, and many other subgroups were quickly assembled. Captain Boland briefed the diverse group upon their arrival at Support Center Boston.
At 6:18 this morning, Marine Safety Office Boston received notification of the fully loaded tank ship Boland Express of Belgian flag and the tank ship Mandaflora of Netherlands flag collided in a position approximately 140 miles due east of Cape Ann, Massachusetts, on the U.S. side of the Hague Line.
At approximately 10:10 this morning, I was informed by the traffic center in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, that the CAN-US Joint Marine Pollution Contingency Plan had been invoked. At that time, I contacted the Regional Director General, who is the head of the Coast Guard of the Maritimes, discussed the situation with them, and the command center will be established at 1700 hours in Yarmouth.
Following the briefing, the various work groups gathered at designated areas and began evaluating the response issues. The Joint Response Team, or JRT, consists of many high-level U.S. and Canadian government agencies, including the United States Coast Guard, the Canadian Coast Guard, the Environmental Protection Agency, and Environment Canada. The JRT is an international advisory team, providing assistance to the on-scene coordinator during pollution incidents affecting both the U.S. and Canada, as described in the Canada-United States Joint Marine Pollution Contingency Plan. The JRT also develops interface between the various agencies, reviews the relationship between the JRT, JERT, and the OSC, and forwards relevant reports and recommendations to the respective agencies involved. The Joint Environmental Emergency Response Team, or JERT, is an environmental advisory team and provides scientific and technical resources to both the JRT and OSC. The JERT evaluates environmental and safety of life issues regarding oil or hazardous material response activities and provides advice on offshore containment, dispersant operations, cleanup, and disposal activities. While assisting the JRT and OSC, the JRT identifies and addresses long-term environmental impact resulting from a major incident. The on-scene coordinator, or OSC, and the deputy OSC coordinate and direct joint pollution efforts at the scene of the incident. The OSC and deputy OSC manage the operational forces involved in the joint response efforts and work closely with the JRT, JRT, and other agencies and industry to jointly meet both countries' requirements. Due to the offshore spill scenario, state, provincial, and local agencies responded independently from the main exercise. Public affairs officials from the U.S. Coast Guard and Transport Canada coordinated media coverage and provided logistical support to all the sub-exercise groups. Both U.S. and Canadian headquarters personnel played a limited role, exercising communications channels and providing guidance to the JRT. The computer communications sub-exercise provided an electronic mail system and bulletin board to the exercise participants. The computer group reviewed and evaluated existing computer capabilities for compatibility on international, interstate, and interprovincial scales. All these sub-exercise groups were controlled and monitored through the Exercise Coordination and Control Team. This team consisted of 3 groups: the exercise directors, the exercise controllers, and the sub-exercise monitors. Collectively, the Coordination and Control Group provided timely input and response to the various agencies and participants involved in Canuslant 90. Sub-exercise players continued their meetings and intergroup communications through the end of Day 1. Meanwhile, the United States Coast Guard Atlantic Area Strike Team commenced a logistical exercise, transporting the Open Water Containment and Recovery System, or OWACRs, from Mobile, Alabama to the U.S. Coast Guard Boston Support Center, where they would familiarize exercise participants with the equipment characteristics and capabilities. The strike team arrived at Hanscom Air Force Base in Bedford, Massachusetts, delivering the OWACRs for simulated use in the cleanup exercise. The strike team carefully unloaded the equipment and readied it for delivery early the next morning. Day 2, Canuslant 90, began early, with the strike team delivering the OWACRs to Support Center Boston. A Massachusetts State Police escort led the delivery to the pier, where the equipment was carefully loaded onto the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Bittersweet. Meanwhile, exercise play continued at the Support Center. The JRT held a meeting to bring exercise players up to date.
Right now, we have already applied. The first plane is out there. The goal was to put one plane out there, an Avenger aircraft with an observation craft, and I've got a phone call directly from the aircraft just before walking in here.
Outside, the Canadian Coast Guard ship Narwhal arrived, and the crew readied for the next day's deployment exercise. A press conference was held after lunch to update the public on response activities.
A total cargo spill of 3.5 million gallons of oil are in the water at this time. A slow-moving slick, approximately 6 miles by 6 miles, is almost in its original position, about 130 kilometers away from the Canadian shore.
The new Oil Pollution Act of 1990 requires that Department of Commerce and its subsidiary, NOAA, in cooperation with the Environmental Protection Agency, monitor and scientifically evaluate long-term environmental effects of a major oil spill. So we are in the process of putting together a research and monitoring group that will look at the effects of this spill in the long term.
Day 3, Canuslant 90. Play resumed with the strike team unloading the OWACR's equipment for shipment back to Mobile, Alabama. Back in the support center, a morning briefing summarized events to date.
Issued 5 pollution reports, 3 news releases, conducted a news brief, held a news conference. And this is basically in a little more than 16 hours of playtime.
Coast Guard Atlantic Strike Team, open water containment equipment was deployed last night and commenced skimming operations. Other equipment was identified, staged, and was ready for transport pending suitable craft for delivery.
There's a total of 6 O-walkers from the strike force, but that's going to require extensive logistics assistance for air transport. We will continue to maintain a contingency with the American Coast Guard and the owners of the manned floor to ensure that we are meeting our responsibilities and we do operate in a cooperative atmosphere.
To demonstrate the capabilities of both Coast Guard and contractor equipment, boom deployment exercises were held offshore and just off the pier in Boston Harbor. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection coordinated the in-harbor exercise, where local vendors displayed various boom, containment, and recovery equipment and cleanup techniques to the crowd gathered along the pier. Concurrently, the Canadian Coast Guard ship Narwhal and the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Bittersweet conducted a boom deployment exercise offshore, just outside Boston Harbor. The Narwhal crew deployed the single sweep system, while the Bittersweet served as a monitoring platform for the exercise participants and invited guests. This exercise provided hands-on training and familiarization with offshore booming techniques for both vessel crews. Rear Admiral Richard I. Rybacke and other dignitaries viewed the exercise from U.S. Coast Guard helicopters and returned to the support center, finishing up an impressive and successful Day 3. Canuslant 90 finished up on Day 4 with a variety of activities. Lively seminars on the use of dispersants and oil spill cleanup operations allowed a variety of ideas and opinions to be shared among the participants. The seminars were followed by an exercise debriefing and press conference. Tom McMillan, Canadian consul to New England, opened the debriefing with his comments on joint pollution response.
Binational pollution problems loomed very, very large on the agenda of the Government of Canada when I was Minister, and I think that is even more true now as the environment is taking off as a growing concern of Canadians and Americans alike. And I wish you much success with your very important job on behalf of both our countries.
2 years ago in St. John, we first used the JERT. Seemed to work well. We thought we had it. This time, we didn't think it was going to be a problem. It became a problem. So that's an area we need to work on a little bit.
The value of being together, of working together and identifying these problems. If everything was perfect, we wouldn't have a reason for being here. And
there is an absolute need in the technical arena for a place to discuss some of these technical issues. The JERT establishes, and I think very appropriately, an arena to discuss technical issues.
I think right now, based on this exercise, I would strongly recommend that specific billets be identified to provide the balance that we need in a long-term and a large response issue.
It is absolutely essential that the who, what, where, when, why, and how goes out very, very quickly and to be amplified very quickly. And I think we must look at the political aspects on the provincial, local, municipal, state levels. The media and our general publics are all very, very much aware and attuned to what's going on in the environment.
Sub-exercise monitors followed with their observations and recommendations.
Overall, we felt the JRT effectively dealt with all issues brought to their attention. Agency representatives raised realistic issues and arguments and remained sensitive to other agency priorities and jurisdictions.
Fishing, harvesting, public consumption, safety were dealt with. Weather issues, once again, immediately dealt with, both agencies, and it's only natural because both would want to know where the oil slicks are going.
The owner's presence, I thought, was the owner of the vessel and the representative of the cargo owner
also, I think added in a very realistic touch. I urge you to please keep that element in any future exercises and attempt to make that owner a little bit more available to not only the OSC but also the JRT.
The area of communications, I think that there is a definite need. We identified it in 1988 when I was the on-scene commander in St. John. This international communications network has to somehow be addressed.
Exercise objective, what we tried to push was to exercise the plan and the annex as it had been signed. And our emphasis this year was to try to get the issues again to the JRT.
The key issues we addressed were dispersant, intervention around the high seas and exclusion zone under the Canada Shipping Act, identification of sensitive areas, fisheries concerns, headquarters play, public affairs, and communications.
Admiral Rybacke concluded the Canuslant 90 briefing with his own reactions.
What we're dealing with is a very complex situation. An oil spill is not a simple operation. And then, of course, when you pile the political agendas on top of the actual physical operation that we're dealing with, we have something that requires a great deal of technical expertise as well as trust.
Canuslant 90 closed out with several press interviews and a final JRT meeting. Exercise players filtered out, confident that Canuslant 90 was a worthwhile and successful exercise for all who participated. Canuslant 90 achieved what it set out to do, namely, exercise and evaluate the Canada-United States Joint Marine Pollution Contingency Plan and Atlantic Operation Appendix. Collectively, the sub-exercise groups evaluated all facets of the joint plan, including existing facilities, equipment, communications, and personnel resources. Briefly, the key sub-exercises were the Joint Response Team, the Joint Environmental Emergency Response Team, the On-Scene Coordinator and Deputy On-Scene Coordinator, state, provincial, and local agencies, public affairs, headquarters, strike team logistical response, the joint offshore boom deployment, and lastly, computer communications. In turn, these groups were observed and monitored by the exercise control team and the work group monitors. Although Canuslant 90 was an overall success, especially when you consider all exercise objectives were either met or addressed, there is still room for improvement.
I can say that we've come a long way from that Argo Merchant scenario. Whether you have still more to do in certain areas, that's something else again. But the objectives that were written down for this exercise have been met.
I'm relieved to hear the briefings because I thought there wasn't going to be anything left to do after this exercise. It's very clear that we have a great deal left to do, and I look forward to this continued cooperation.
The successes achieved and problems identified at Canuslant 90 should serve to help everyone involved and improve the planning efforts for Canuslant 92. In the meantime, it's hoped everyone who participated will take what they learned and apply it to any real incidents which may occur. After all, Canuslant 90 was designed to help exercise participants in their everyday, real-life response activities. Until Canuslant 92,